So, Kenneth, thanks for joining us today. We're going to dive into Microsoft Purview as it relates to generative AI. That's all AI, including Copilot. Nick Doan is our chief Purview SME we have here at Levacloud, and he'll be going through the presentation today. If at any moment you have any questions, feel free to put them in chat or use the Q&A section. If today was going to be a small group as it is, if you'd prefer, I can also unmute you if you just want to have any discussions. Just raise your hand and let me know. And feel free to put any of those questions or anything into the chat during the presentation. From there, at the end, we will make time for a Q&A, but I'll also follow up with you via email with the recording for today's call. All right, Nick, you want to introduce yourself and get us started here?
Sure. My name is Nick Doan. I've been here at Levacloud for a few months now, but I've been dealing with Microsoft Purview space and Microsoft in general since it's been around. If you've ever heard of OCS or BPOS, then you kind of know how long I've been involved in the game, right? I've seen every aspect of it, including GCC High, and dealt with a lot of compliance pieces over the years, and just happy to help kind of keep driving the view when it comes to data protection or data security, and especially in the new age of AI. So with that, we can go ahead and get a little bit started into the information here. Happy to be, presenting. Kenneth, mostly to you at the moment, but let me go ahead and turn off my camera for making it a little bit easier to focus on the content for everybody. And then we will get started here in 1 second. Let me just pull up this piece, and then we will get going. So today we are here to talk about securing data in the age of AI with Microsoft Purview. So as we all know, data is one of our top priorities this day and age. Security used to be the biggest thing back a few years ago, but with generative AI becoming such a prevalent piece in the past few months really, Purview or data security has taken kind of a front seat to it again. So a lot of people are bringing it up and wanting to talk about the renewed discussion. So, we treat everything here as kind of a zero trust architecture, right? And everybody hears that word zero trust. It's a big buzzword these days, but when we look at it from three kind of different areas, right? So we have the identities, the endpoints, and then kind of the applications over there. And we look at it from securing your foundational pieces, right? Making sure that your identities and your endpoints are trusted devices that you're able to get in, block information, or block access where required, and give access to your end users to be able to do their jobs on a day-to-day basis, all while protecting your information. Preparing or looking for information related to anything going on inside of your environments. Most organizations already have this, but we consider this, to be one of the most important pieces, being able to see everything and ensure some sort of response, so that we also partner with Blackpoint as Levacloud to do managed detection and response. So we don't actually do it as an organization ourselves, but we do set everything up and partner with them in order to get you guys going there. And then what we're mostly here to talk about today is the data classification or data security, if you will, to make sure that we're protecting sensitive information, not just from leaving our organization, but in the age of AI, making sure that that information isn't out there being leveraged to train external models. And then, of course, we're always the experts that have access to all of this and are willing to help in any scenario. So getting started, right? The main risk with generative AI is that we don't know what controls we have. We don't know some of our capabilities, our visibility into the controls, the lack of controls to protect data, or at least the perception of lack of control, to protect that data in AI, and then increased regulatory pressure, right? This day and age, regulatory pieces are coming out a lot faster, especially again with the generative AI push in the world today. So some of these concerns are just the insufficient visibility into being able to see how those applications are being used, or how that information is being used when it comes to generative AI, right? So one of the things that I like to kind of caution people is that as long as we're protecting uh, our data, we're protecting information from generative AI. Now, this comes mostly from a Purview perspective, right? Because if we're leveraging labels and data loss prevention pieces, we're protecting that information from anywhere that we need it to be, or anywhere that it could potentially go. So one of the pieces that we most worry about, or the biggest concerns, are going to be the data leak, right? Somebody accidentally putting information into a generative AI app, not realizing that they're putting that sensitive information out there, and that then trains the model and essentially ends up leading to a leak. Second one being a data oversharing, right? People not realizing that they might have access to information that they don't need access to. So uh, Copilot specifically doesn't have access to any of the data that a user doesn't already have access to, right? So Copilot is not increasing somebody's access to information. It is just making it more easy for somebody to access, thus meaning that the permissions that were there are likely are a little looser than they should be to begin with. And we're just now realizing that, right? So it's again renewing that thought process of having to lock down our controls and take a look at how we're protecting our information. The next one being non-compliance usage. So what this means is somebody that can easily gather information or create content that might cause compliance issues inside of your organization. And this could be fraudulent content. This could be something to help with stock manipulation, and it could go even further than that, right? But the idea is that we want to protect and make sure that our users are using it in a compliant way, and that they're not able to get information that they shouldn't have access to or shouldn't be able to see. Now, from the Microsoft perspective, this is a shared responsibility model. So you can see as we fill in, there's different levels and different pieces, right? So as Copilot is a SaaS application, Microsoft does take the majority of the responsibility to protect that information and make sure that everything is good there. And we have a little bit of responsibility to make sure that we're training our users and make sure that we have policies to protect some of that data where it shouldn't be going. Now, Microsoft is going to be doing things like encrypting your data at rest, making sure that it's not going to other tenants, that it's not accessible, things of that nature. But we are still responsible for making sure that our users know how to deal with that data and not leverage it. As we get into the IaaS and the PaaS, the little bit more open models, it becomes more on us, the customer of those applications or those services, to be more responsible for the protection of that information, because we are the ones that are managing that, right? So the middle one there, the PaaS, the Azure AI, is kind of the one that everybody is looking at these days, where you can call it the Copilot. What is it? The Copilot Studio, that's the name of it, where you're able to bring in other applications and other data into your Copilot environment and be able to leverage that just the same way that you would be able to leverage your SharePoint or email or anything of that nature, all from one model. Now, you can see that it adds a little bit of responsibility to us because we have to design it, we have to make sure that it's good, all of those pieces. Microsoft takes big pride in their controls and what they already have for Copilot, right? They have some general protections in place, making sure that your information is encrypted at rest, making sure that there are some standard protections that people can't just look up financial information. Obviously, by default, that's there are a couple ways around that, and that's where Purview comes into play, right? Because we need to make sure that we're only granting access to data or granting Copilot access to areas for a specific user that it needs. Now, again, I say it that way because Copilot only has access to what the prompter has access to. It's using or it's looking up and accessing Microsoft Graph and the semantic index based on the permissions of whoever is prompting. So it is not just a all-out control that Copilot has access to everything. It is based on the particular user. So what we do here is we protect and govern that data and how it can enter into generative AI and all those different platforms. These are the solutions that we can leverage and the capabilities that we have for the different areas. So we can use data security, data loss prevention, insider risk management, adaptive protection to make sure that we're protecting our data, not just from Copilot, but from inadvertent access or data leak in general, but especially with Copilot or other generative AI platforms across any platform that we might use, the life cycle that it's in, things like that. And then the data governance piece, which used to be Azure AI, or excuse me, Azure Purview, which is now part of the unified Purview platform, is where you could do data maps, data catalog, really kind of getting into the data governance piece of it, and then risk and compliance, making sure that we're able to recall that information, see how users are leveraging Copilot. Are they prompting it for inappropriate pieces or non-compliant pieces of information that they shouldn't be focusing on? This is a comprehensive solution. Purview in and of itself can be used across almost every aspect of an organization, right? Anything that is enterprise built, Copilot, third party, making sure that we're protecting that information. And we'll see a little bit of that here in a couple minutes, that we have a couple slides showcasing how that information is leveraged, how it can be blocked, and what the different capabilities are to show you how you can protect this. Again, it's not just from the Microsoft 365 piece, because it can leverage the third-party apps. As we get more into this, what it does is it gives us some unparalleled visibility, right? Being able to see how users are leveraging Copilot, as we just mentioned, being able to see what Copilot is returning to them, and giving us great protection to understand that information is not allowed to be going into AI prompts, whether it's Copilot, Gemini, Brad, whatever the case may be. And then the compliance controls that, again, we can put in there, protecting that information, stopping it from going out. So it gives us the full gamut of everything that we would need there, being able to pull that information up. Now I'm going to display a quick slide here. So this is talking or showing how Microsoft 365 Copilot works, or Copilot for Microsoft 365. So you can see that there's a white boundary around everything, and that boundary is actually Microsoft's service boundary. So Copilot, your prompts, the information that it gathers, returns, never leaves that service boundary while it's gathering all of that information. Now, by default, Copilot only searches things like Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Power BI, and I think one more service that I can't recall off the top of my head, to gather information, right? So it doesn't have access to everything everywhere. It also does not have necessarily have access to shared mailboxes that you have access to, and it does not always have access to information shared from OneDrive with you. So it is very poignant on making sure that you only see information that you have access to. And just about the time that it brings that information back to you, which would be stage 5 here, is when it goes back into Microsoft Graph to gather the final pieces of information and applies any compliance or purview policies that need to be applied. So this could be stopping information from being allowed to be returned, applying sensitivity labels to the information being returned during the return process or while it's writing it to you, or anything of the sort. Again, this information does not leave Microsoft's boundaries, and it does not train the model, which is very important here. Now, Azure AI or Azure OpenAI, as you can see there off to the far right, that is the PaaS solution that we were talking about earlier, where Microsoft gives you the platform and you're able to build some pieces in there to bring all sorts of information in and leverage it inside of your prompting capabilities. Now, how can Microsoft Purview help with these particular scenarios? And we're going to go through a couple of them here. So we're going to start with data leak, right? The first common scenario is that somebody accidentally copies information into, we'll just say ChatGPT here, about something that they want to have referenced. Now that information ends up getting leaked into the platform and ultimately going into the trained model, and now it's available out there for anybody to be able to recall, right? So how Purview helps there is you can get visibility into these prompts through what Microsoft now calls DSPM for AI, or Data Security Posture Management for AI. Used to previously be known as AI Hub, if you had seen that before, but it has since been renamed. It's the same platform, but it has been renamed. You can create endpoint DLP policies to prevent that sensitive information from being copied or pasted into AI platforms. And you can make DLP policies that do adaptive protection, meaning that as the day goes on and as the user potentially becomes more risky in their activities, more of their activity will be restricted without blocking legitimate business access or business activities. So now we can prevent that information from being uploaded into ChatGPT, while other users that aren't as high risk can still access and do things that they might be able to, such as browse to ChatGPT. So here is a quick screenshot. You can see that when you try and upload information that has been labeled or protected, it will, leveraging endpoint DLP, block that information from being able to be pasted into the browser so that it cannot be leveraged. Even if they were to take the document and paste it in there, the platform would not have the capability to open the Microsoft encryption and use the document itself. Next, we'll talk about a little bit of data oversharing. So this is, somebody who might be trying to reference some information or look at something. This particular scenario is talking about exfiltration, potentially for personal gain, right? Looking up a specific project that maybe they shouldn't have access to or that they want to know more about, but they're looking at that information that they probably shouldn't have access to. So what we can leverage from the Microsoft Purview platform is communication compliance. You can also leverage that DSPM for AI to do it, but communication compliance is the driving factor behind it. So that's going to help us detect prompts that are containing, in this case, the Project Obsidian keywords. It can automatically apply, or we can automatically apply sensitivity labels to SharePoint libraries or files containing the words Project Obsidian to help further restrict access when we know who is needed to be there, right? So only allowing the team members or the group or the team in the organization that should have access being able to be the ones to see it, but then also leveraging, again, data loss prevention to protect that information from being exfiltrated, whether that's copying to USB, uploading to a website, what have you. Here you can see that this is stating that the user is detected as potentially risky because they're not supposed to be sharing information. and it blocks the access as we're uploading it. Here you'll be able to see, or next you'll be able to see that we have the screenshot of communication compliance showing that somebody was asking Copilot for information on this particular project. So you can see that it's recalling that information and being able to show you what users are prompting, when they're prompting, what the returns are, and leveraging communication compliance. You can detect anyone leveraging Copilot for potentially nefarious reasons. Communication compliance in and of itself, excuse me, without Copilot or without even the need of Copilot, can protect things from, or organizations from like insider trading or collusion, just foul language in that sense. But it also plays into Copilot. Excuse me for 1 second. Now here, next you'll be able to see kind of a scenario of somebody asking Copilot to write a short FAQ on the project Obsidian that that they have access to, right? So this is somebody who has access to the information. They're not being blocked. They are allowed to use it. The information has been labeled as, confidential, because that's what the project is. We don't want to have people, or people shouldn't have access to it where they aren't working on the project. So this person is writing a short FAQ, or asking Copilot to write a short FAQ. And you can see that because they have permissions, it wrote the FAQ, but because it had a sensitivity label applied to it, it automatically applied that sensitivity label to the created content. So we didn't have to rely on the user applying the sensitivity label or gathering this information into an unprotected document. Copilot recognized that this was protected information and applied the same protections to the outcome of the prompt. Now, if you have multiple prompts or multiple labels that it has seen from the information it's using, it will take the highest label. So if you have one that is just general, if you have one that is confidential, and Copilot references both of those documents to gather information for this FAQ, it's going to label it confidential because it is the highest of the label structures. Copilot can also, or Purview can also block that information, as we stated, from being able to have it returned from users that shouldn't have access to it. So this is an example prompt inside of a Teams, or the M365 console, where a user is asking about Project Obsidian, and it's telling them that it cannot find that information because they don't have access either through the site locations itself or the labels to see that information. Now, there are a couple scenarios that can change those things. When a label is applied and there are permissions there, you have to have the extract permissions there in order to be able to have Copilot review or pull that information out and leverage it. So even if a user has access to the information inside of a document or email, if we have removed that extract permission, they will still not be able to have it returned by Copilot, or leveraged by Copilot, but they would still be able to interact with it and deal with it just as they do any other document. Here you can see that while this person now that we're referencing here has access to see information related to Project Obsidian, you can see it pulled some important documents and gave descriptions on those documents, and it told him, you can see right at the center of the screen, that the confidential Project Obsidian label was applied to the documents, that there is going to be potential controls in place that will stop him from being able to take that information out, whatever the scenario might be. So it's clearly stating that this information is protected. It's not just returning it and not giving an end user any kind of information that this wasn't protected, it is right there in front of everybody to make sure that they are aware that the information they're using is sensitive and may not be available for everybody else. Here you can see again some more information on it. You can see the references of all the documents, so you can see what it was there. And again, as I just stated, it takes the most restrictive of all of the documents that might be returned to make sure that that information, that sensitive information, doesn't get accidentally exfiltrated or put somewhere. Now, the last scenario that we talk about from this kind of perspective is the non-compliance usage, right? How do we protect from the risks of data compliance? So here again, we can leverage communication compliance to be able to look for any of those risky prompts, see what users are asking about, and make sure that users are using it to the standard that we expect as an organization. Being able to leverage data lifecycle management and keep those records for longer than we would expect, or Microsoft default keeps them, we can leverage the audit capabilities of Purview or M365 in general, and e-discovery of the Purview platform to be able to find this information and leverage it, or potentially create a case if needed, and do investigations and put that information on litigation hold so that it remains for as long as we need it to be around. Now, by default, Copilot information or prompts and responses are actually only kept for anywhere from 1 to 7 days, depending on the platform that they use to make the prompt and how relevant that information is to prompts they continue to make. So Copilot keeps that information for context, but only for a certain period of time. Once that context period is passed, that information is basically removed and put into an invisible folder inside of your Exchange or your mailbox, and then it sits there until it's ready to be permanently deleted, which is a maximum of 7 days, unless we have a retention policy. So it is important to make sure that we're keeping those retention policies in place for those interactions so that we have records of what users are prompting, the information that's being returned, and we can follow up if there needs to be. Ultimately, this can help us detect any non-compliance usage of Copilot and make sure that we're protecting ourselves from the inevitability of going through litigation with somebody, right? We can have this is what was returned, this is what they asked, whatever the case might be. Here you could see what communication compliance looks like from a non-compliant prompt. So this is being able to see that they're asking for, I believe this is stock manipulation, right? Show me all the reasons that we would want to make Contoso a weak stock. And says that it can't find that information because, again, Microsoft has pretty much, built it in there not to do these things, not show financial information, try and stop the stock manipulation, insider trading, all of those kinds of things by default. Now, obviously, again, we want to make sure that we're putting with Purview our protections on top of it, not just protecting the information from exfiltration, but protecting us as an organization from any potential ramifications of somebody misusing Copilot. This is a view of what the retention policy looks like in the area that you would select for Copilot interactions to retain that through the data lifecycle management piece. So it gives you a specific area, which I believe is actually being broken out into its own area for Copilot interactions within the near future. But right now, it is both Teams Chat and M365 Copilot interactions. So you can keep that information for whatever period of time that you want, and you have two options at the end of that. You have the option of forcefully removing the data, or you have the option of not doing anything with the data and allowing whatever happened to it during that retention period to take place. So What that means is that as long as you retain the data, right, Copilot interactions and Teams chat messages are going to be kept. Let's just say for 7 years, because it's a pretty standard one. So all of that information is going to be retained for 7 years. If you do nothing, which is the second half or the second option, then all of the chat information will remain at the end of that 7 years unless a user has deleted that chat from their Teams chat boxes. But the Copilot interactions will disappear at the end of that retention period because they're only kept for 1 to 7 days in general. So they're already marked for deletion at the time of that 7-day period, and then being retained for as long as the retention or the legal hold is in place. Same thing with the chat messages again. So if we forcefully delete them at the end of that 7-year period, all Copilot interactions and all Teams messages or Teams chats would be deleted if they haven't been interacted with in the past 7 years. Now you can do it based off of time created or last modified, which brings us into 2 different areas, but it gives us a little bit more control. Here you can see what it looks like when we pull that audit information from the audit logs to see what's happening, right? So we could see that somebody requested or prompted Copilot. We could see the IDs, we could see the user key, the time, the IP address that they leveraged from. But this is really just to kind of show that they interacted with Copilot. It's not really giving us a whole lot of information. It's just helping us in our investigation. But here in eDiscovery, this is where we can gather a lot more information, see what they call, I'm drawing a blank, apologies. I cannot remember off the top of my head what it's called, but it basically puts the prompts into order so that you can understand how somebody went throughout the Copilot interaction. So it's being able to see it, from the time they made the first prompt to the time that they stopped using it, or anything that they've done in between. So it's not just going around and finding the information, because there are scenarios in this platform where when you search for Copilot interactions, it will be out of order. It will, take time to find it, but eDiscovery can help put it in order so that you can see everything. And I cannot remember for the life of me what it's called. My apologies. So here is a slide that is going to talk a little bit about the areas that we can control some of this information. Now, obviously, Purview is going to be one of the best ones that we have because it's going to be able to protect files and at the file level and that information there. Now, it can also protect sites and team sites and SharePoint sites and M365 groups, other things like that. We could put labels on information and stop Copilot or people from accessing that information at the top level, but on a file, it is more valuable because it can be, that label will follow that file anywhere that it goes. Restricted SharePoint search is built into SharePoint, and it basically allows you to remove the indexing of SharePoint sites so that it cannot be searched by Copilot, but also might not be able to be searched by end users in general. So there is, a give and take there where we have to understand that the SharePoint site won't be searchable by a user anywhere on SharePoint as well as in Copilot, but it will protect the data, right? Nobody will be able to return that information and gather information that they're not supposed to have access to. Then SharePoint Advanced Management goes a little bit further, gives us some more of those capabilities, and it also allows us to do data lifecycle or user lifecycle management on access to the sites, right? So we can do automated access reviews of SharePoint sites, which is not built into the access reviews pieces of Entra. This is a separate area, and it helps to, remain or keep access at the least amount of people needed by doing those access reviews. Also, removing access for Copilot and that particular user to be able to return that information. Here you can see that some of the auditing tools that are available, so e-discovery, communication, compliance, and the different pieces that they can cover in some of the areas that it will talk about. So, using audit logs to identify how, where, when these interactions occurred, and maybe some items that were accessed, but then leveraging e-discovery to be able to understand or see the prompts and the responses and understand or put that information on hold to be able to use later on in the environment or later on in a potential legal case. Then we have communication compliance, which is going to be able to detect that information, that risky information, being able to show how users are leveraging that information or leveraging the tool itself, and then the retention policies, which is going to be number 4 there. So leveraging the retention policies to be able to make sure that that information is discoverable when you need it to be. Putting on a retention on a label or a SharePoint site or documents in and of themselves helps to keep all of that information, but also the Copilot prompts as we showed earlier. So number 5 is if you have a compliance requirement, you can put that information to delete the Copilot responses after after that information is past its lifetime. So 5, 6, and 7 are all really based around retention labels, but then there is some information being able to create your own SharePoint sites and put that in there. But the reality is that communication, compliance, and retention are going to be some of the biggest pieces that we have to be able to detect and discover that information, then e-discovery to be able to tie it all together and bring that information and see how users are leveraging the platform. Now, this is strengthening all of our security, right? Being able to see all of this stuff, putting it in, and it's just a holistic approach. But, really the idea is that, building the foundation, being able to create sensitive information types, put DLP policies in place, use automated labeling and endpoint DLP and some of those capabilities, we can help you protect your AI journey. Purview can help you protect your AI journey to make sure that your sensitive information that is in your Microsoft environment or potentially even some third-party applications is protected from being leaked or discovered or misused when a user is leveraging Copilot to deal with this information or gather information more quickly than you would expect them to or expect them to be able to. Now, we do have a couple extra little slides in here that are just going to show a little bit more information and a couple more scenarios of how this information can be dealt with, and a couple of those looks. So you can see here that as somebody is prompting Copilot, it's letting them know that this contains sensitive information and that it will apply that information, or that it will apply that sensitivity label to the document to make sure that they are aware it's gathering sensitive information. You can again here see that that sensitive output is telling them, or it's telling them that that information is sensitive and that there is what document was referenced that had that sensitive information. You can also see that it'll apply the label to an entire conversation if it's leveraging sensitive information. So it's not just the response, but it can apply that label to the entire conversation, making sure that the entire conversation is protected and not just available or just protecting the sensitive information. So it restricts who can even leverage the Copilot information outside of litigation hold, things of that nature. You can see again that it will automatically apply sensitivity labels based on the information there. Don't mind the fact that it says AI Hub. This is an older slide. You can see again that it will block that information from being pasted to third-party applications, that we will be able to see those interactions through eDiscovery, what they asked, what was returned. And then we can look up specific interactions through the audit, right? So you can see here that interacted with Copilot. So this would be how you would leverage audit logs in order to be able to look at those particular pieces. Then the Teams chat and Copilot interactions being able to be retained for a long period or whatever period we need in order to protect our information appropriately and protect ourselves mostly from any scenario where somebody might be trying to gather information that they shouldn't have. Again, here you can see somebody trying to access sensitive information to a project. Now, lastly, we have this slide, which shows the capabilities based on the licensing level that you have. Some of it is, relatively standard. Some of it has more capability based on the level. Now, it's just showing from an E3, E5 perspective, but is it also the same if you have the E5 compliance? Some of it can be done with some of the smaller models like IPNG, E5 compliance, or I forget what the one in between those two are off the top of my head, so I apologize. But you have capability and you're able to look at the different slides and still be, or the different levels of licenses and still be able to figure out how to best protect everything. That does bring us to the end of this particular presentation. I unfortunately do not have a Q&A slide. This was a slide deck that I've used multiple times for other presentations, but I wanted to open it up, Tony, to you and being able to look at any potential questions that we have or any comments about anything that we've gone over.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of put something in the Q&A section. Not sure if you can see that on your end, but I'm happy to read it aloud. What Kenneth asks is, he said, just for clarity, the data leakage example relies on the information being labeled and the Defender client running on the user endpoint to block the exfiltration. Is that a correct understanding of the flow?
So good question. That is not necessarily the need for it. So data loss prevention, depending on the scenario and where it is, can happen with or without the data being labeled. Having the information labeled or having the data labeled and leveraging the endpoint DLP capabilities on the device does make it easier to leverage that paste and block, but it is not necessarily required that the document be labeled because you can use real-time scanning of that sensitive information. The label just makes it easier because it's predispositioned.